Welcome to everyone here. This is probably, we've been running these forums, I guess, for close to 20 years now in Lodi, so we're very proud to be working with the high school. And Chris, who have we got today, students-wise?
I'm sorry?
We're the, what class?
Government and social issues.
Thank you. Welcome aboard, and we hope you participate today in the forum. Our format is the same as it has been. Typically, we have 2-minute opening statements from the candidates. After those statements are completed, we will open it up for questions from the audience, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to those questions on a rotating basis. And then we will have 2-minute closing statements. With no further ado, we will begin the forum with an opening statement from Mr. Luther Olson, Republican candidate from Ripon. Mr. Olson.
Okay. There we go. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the Lodi Optimist Club. Having this forum here at the high school, I think it's great that high school students get to see democracy in action, and I hope you guys have some questions. You probably get extra points for asking questions on your homework. That's usually the way it goes. Anyway, I'm Luther Olson. I live in Ripon, Wisconsin. I'm the state senator from the 14th Senate District. I have been in the Senate for 12 years. I chair the Education Committee in the Senate. I am the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Finance. I serve as the representative of the Senate on the UW Hospital Board. Involved, I serve on the board of the Education Communications Board of Directors, which is public radio and public TV. I've also been involved in some national organizations dealing with education. I've been the past vice president of the Education Commission of the States in Denver, Colorado, the organization that the states belong to that look at education policy across the country. For a 2-year term, I was the co-chair of the National Conference of State Legislators Education Committee, so I've been involved in education at the state and the national level. I feel very fortunate to be able to represent the people of the 14th Senate District. It's a large district, as you can probably guess. It is about 150 miles north to south and about 70 miles or so east to west, and it is relatively rural, and manufacturing is a big part of that district. And I'm fortunate enough to be in leadership roles in the state Senate, especially being on Joint Finance, the committee that puts the budget together. And again, it's great to be here.
Thank you. I also would want to, I thank you for coming today, and I appreciate you putting on this forum. It really means a lot to know that you people are here and that you are really concerned about what's going on in the state of Wisconsin, and especially when it has to do with political groups. Just want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I was born and raised in the city of Waupaca, which is one of the most northern parts of this 14th Senate District. I grew up with 9 brothers and sisters. I'm a UW Stevens Point graduate. I've been married to my wife Terry for 37 years. I have 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren. My first career actually was as a teacher and a coach, where I coached football, basketball, baseball, and just about everything they could throw at you that you wanted to do. And I was also the president of the Teachers Association when I was there, so I also negotiated contracts for teachers at that time. My second life was I opened up a small business in Waupaca as an accountant. I have a public accounting firm, and I have grown that to a second office, which is also in Manawa. And I've taken on a partner about 11 or 12 years ago, and we call that Smith & Radke Accounting LLC. And where we do over 3,500 individual tax returns, not counting businesses and nonprofit returns that we do there too. My parents were small business owners also. They owned a small bar in downtown Waupaca. I guess I'm going to go real quick here. on this. But most importantly, I am the mayor of City of Waupaca, so I have some political background, and that's the main reason why I feel that I want to run for the state senate.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our opening statements from the candidates, and now we will entertain questions. I ask people to be direct with their questions and ask questions, not to make commentary so much. And we will begin with the first. Please identify yourself when you are asking the question. And Mr. Breinig has a microphone. And the first question directed to Luther Olson.
I'm John Olson from Dane. I wanted to ask the candidates if they would, if they're elected, if they would do something to prevent the 999 amendments to the budget. These are clear policy amendments. They're usually sent through in the dark of the night. There's no public comment, and the legislator who submits them is not identified. This is really a bad practice, and I think it should stop. And I'd like to know if either of you would support stopping the policy in the budget amendments.
Yeah.
The problem with the 999 motions are there are things that are embedded in there that makes people want to vote for the motion even though there are things that they don't like as much. And they have a hard time really weighing whether they should vote for this motion because basically what a 999 is that they put a lot of many small motions into, or they can be large motions too, into one. And they usually have things in there that are their pet peeves within their districts or within their party. And what happened was that there were a couple of tough 999 motions that happened in the past. And I can see why my opponent has decided to just say yes on this, but it's very hurtful usually because they have to make a tough decision on it. I mean, just an example of that is in the most recent 999 motion was to strip us of our open records. And my opponent has said that he voted for that motion because there was something within that motion that he felt very strongly about and he didn't want to lose that. Well, you know, losing your open records rights within the state is much more important than anything else that could have happened. So.
Next question directed to Brian Smith first.
So I'm wondering
Name, please.
who, oh, I'm sorry.
Please identify yourself.
Margot Miller. And I'm wondering who you'll support in this presidential election. Do you support your party leadership all the way up to the presidential level? And for both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good question. I have to tell you, I am running as a Democrat, but I really feel that I am an independent running as a Democrat because I'm the type of person that reaches across the aisle and wants to make sure that 100% of the people agree with what needs to be done. But with that said, I knew this question was going to come, and quite honestly, I'm looking at the person that I feel is best suited to run our country, and the person that has really shown to me through all of these months of the bickering and so on that's going on, that they are the best suited person to do that. And I do believe the Democratic choice for president is the best choice and that's Hillary Clinton is the best choice for president in this coming election.
They call it secret ballot for a reason, and really it's not my intention to tell you who I'm going to vote for, honestly, because I'm running for the 14th Senate District. I think my body of work is what you need to look at, what I've done in the past, what I stand for. What I say to people, it's like, you know, we are a country of 300 million people, And if these are the best two we can come up with, I don't know what's going on here. Honestly, I don't like either candidate. I don't like if Mrs. Clinton gets elected, what she will do, and I really don't know if Donald Trump gets elected, what he will do really at all. And so, whoever wins, the country is going probably in a different direction than it is right now. So I'm not going to tell you who I'm going to vote for, because my opinion on who I vote for is really no different than yours. I have the same information that you do. I have one vote just like you do, and what my position on as president does not affect my job in the state senate. So that's my answer.
Next question directed first to Luther Olson.
I'm Stan Roosh from Lodi. I don't really care who you vote for. I want to know if you support Donald Trump for president.
Have I endorsed it? No.
Mr. Smith, do you care to comment? You have 90 seconds.
I
Mr.
don't,
Olson, you done?
Yeah.
okay. I don't think that question was really directed at me. I think I answered who I felt was the best candidate for the presidency.
Next question directed to Brian Smith. Letting these extra credit opportunities fly past us rapidly, like a gale force wind. Yes, sir.
If I wait till Bill's done, you'll be here for a while. Sorry. My name is Jeff Mayer, and my question is this: we're having a referendum here for the school, and it seems to me that, I think it's true that we have a limited budget in the state. How do you rank education as far as getting money from that limited budget, and why?
Brian.
Well, if I understand the question right, Lodi has had to go to referendum. I think they have 3 referendums, I think, that are going on. And obviously, one of the main reasons that I'm running for state senate is that I truly believe the Lodi people should decide what's best for their community. And I would like to see that the people that are elected to that position and the people that know their constituents the best get to decide that for them. Yeah, it's pretty scary what's happened under the current administration, which is my opponent. He says that he's the chairman of the education, but since 2010, there's been about $8.5 million that has been cut out of the education fund just in our district alone. Lodi school districts have seen about a 14% decrease in their funding to their schools. And not only that, but we have 2 school systems now in our state, and I've said all along, and many of us have said this, it's impossible to fund 2 school systems in our state. So we've seen a public school drop of $210 per pupil, but we've seen an increase to the private schools of $911, where we have no control over what they teach or what they do or who those teachers are.
Education, in my book and in the state's book, is the most important thing that we spend our money on. In fact, more money goes to K-12 education than any other area in the budget. In fact, when we were in the recession in the early 2000s, we put extra money into continue to fund education and increase it every year, even though we didn't have the money. We took the tobacco securitization money, or we took the tobacco settlement money and sold it off at like 26 cents on the dollar so we could fund schools. So that one-time money is gone. We use transportation money to fund education, and then borrowed money for roads. And then the last spending more than we're bringing in. But last year, Governor Doyle was governor. He used the stimulus money, the federal money to fund schools and cut the GPR dollars out. So we were using, again, one-time money. And so what has happened then is, we've been in a recession, our revenue is not where it should, and so we had to make some cuts. I have been a strong proponent and fought my governor and my party for a while until they got on board to not approve the governor's budget as he put forth, to give schools more money, and we gave schools more money after the 2010 budget every year, except this year, or last year.
Directed to you. First question to Mr. Olson.
Oh, my name is Alex Bonmary from Lodi, and I was wondering, how do you guys plan to create more funding for schools like Lodi?
Well, the easiest way would be to have the economy going strong so that we could use GPR dollars. GPR dollars, general purpose revenue dollars that we get in are from sales and income taxes. Local school districts get money from the feds, they get money from the state, and they get property tax dollars. So, in essence, the easiest answer for Lodi to get more money is just ask its taxpayers, would you tax yourself more for money that stays in our community to educate our boys and girls for their future? That's probably the easiest thing. It's a challenge when the economy is not growing and costs continue to go up. I agree 100%, but I think the easiest way is through referendums, local control, saying we value our education in our state. The state has said, okay, you have revenue limits, you can only spend this much, unless your local folks say, we would like to spend more on our children, and they have that opportunity.
Actually, an excellent question, quite honestly, because it's thought-provoking. We all know education is very important to our state, to our country. That's what makes us the best country in the world, because of our education, quite honestly. So that's a great question. But then again, we also have to pay for that, and that concerns people. Well, number one, what you could do is stop funding two systems within our state of Wisconsin. We cannot afford to pay for two systems. We were set up to pay for public schools alone. People that send their students to private schools, and that's fine, you want to send them to there, they never thought that they were going to get public monies that were going to be used for private schools. And so that's the number one thing that I think you could do, and that's not even raising taxes. And isn't it the perfect example of why I talk about local control so much? But here, the state doesn't want to buck up. They don't want to say what we need to do here. They want to put it on the backs of the locals, okay? They want to have the locals do a referendum to raise it so that we can increase education, instead of really trying to come to the root of the issue and take care of that issue at the state level.
Next question directed first to Brian Smith.
Let's change the subject to roads. Brian Smith pointed out with education the same problem we have with roads. There's no funding. The borrow and spend model is unsustainable going into the future. There's some community that has suggested they might levy a wheel tax. Well, that just changes the burden from where it belongs to the local government. And there's another proposal that apparently didn't gain any momentum to allow communities to increase the sales tax in order to pay for their roads. Once again, that transfers from the place where the cost should be determined to a local control. And so I'd like to hear you guys talk about how we're going to pay for roads.
You know, we're getting momentum here, obviously, that transportation is a huge issue. And of course, most of us have known that that's a huge issue in our state for quite a while. It's been ignored, quite honestly, especially in the rural areas for the last few years. But, you know, there's a number of things that we can do, and we need to make improvements to our roads. And quite honestly, the governor's answer of not doing projects in the southeastern part of the state and taking that money and putting it into the rural areas and other areas of the state is not the answer, because those projects still need to be done. And they're more cost efficient to do those projects now. And I think we all agree that we need to make sure that everything is running more efficiently within the DOT. I thought that those things should have been done quite a while ago, quite honestly, but that is one thing. But let's talk about the road tax. And I appreciate where you're coming with the wheel tax, where they're trying to put that onto the locals, quite honestly. But nobody wants to see an increase in tax, but how about an increase in a user fee? And gas tax is really a user fee. If you use the roads, you pay for it. And if you were to raise your road tax, your gas tax, by 1 cent, that's going to increase our budget by $63 million over a biennial budget. So the road tax is a good place to start, obviously, to help our roads.
You're exactly right. The transportation budget is probably the biggest thing that we're going to deal with in this next budget. And raising revenue is always tough. I remember when I first was in the assembly, Governor Thompson wanted to raise taxes, gas tax, he wanted a franchise fee. And it was so difficult to get it done that we took the transportation budget out of the regular budget and didn't pass it for a couple of months later. But, you know, I think that really the biggest answer is, as Brian said, a user fee, which is gas tax. And one of the nice things about that gas tax is 20% of it is paid for by people outside the state of Wisconsin. And so why would we not want to do something that we, you know, we always want to tax our neighbors in our other states. When we have a chance to do it, let's finally do it. But it's political because a lot of people don't want to do this. You talked about the wheel tax. We talked about the locals. All taxes come from people. They don't come from the city or the county. It comes from people who have to pay them. And so if a community wants to do a wheel tax for their streets that the general public doesn't really drive on, that's fine, let them do that. To help plow their snow or whatever, they have the ability to do that. But I think the biggest answer is not borrow like has been proposed, but to raise revenue, use it.
This question.
Who are you, please?
Oh, pardon me.
Thank you.
Allison Seaton, OP. And this is about a decision to deprive me of my fair vote. So, and this is to Mr. Olson. In April and May of 2011, Luther Olson, Keith Ripp, Glenn Groveman signed a secret non-disclosure agreement to redistrict Wisconsin, which assures that he, Ripp, Groveman, and all other Republicans could never be voted out of office. That agreement ensured the Republicans will always win every election with less than a majority of the vote. To be more precise, for many in this room, your vote doesn't count. So please explain to me and the rest of us in the room the ethics involved in your decision to deprive us of our vote.
Well, I sort of disagree with you. You do have a right to vote, and redistricting, just like happens every 10 years. But you brought it up about signing that document. When a bill, and the redistricting is a bill, and the people who put that together have, under the way it works right now, have an ability to do it in secret until it comes out. And then all the paperwork comes out. And so what they were doing, and the other side does the same thing when they do their maps, is they were sharing something that somebody was working on with us, who weren't the authors of the bill, and for us to see it, we had to say, we will not talk about it. That's just, that happens in, well, a lot of times they don't, when people are working on a bill, they don't share it with us, but whatever. But if you look at, and let's talk about redistricting, I think it was since, I think it was 1980, the courts have decided the redistricting map in Wisconsin. This is the first time in 30-some years that one party did. And I sort of chuckle because when the Democrats were in control, they had the Senate, the Assembly, and the governorship. The budget, or the year before redistricting came about, they did not pass a bill to change how we redistricting, because honestly, they were going to do the same thing we did, assuming they were in power. So, you know, to say that one party wants to do things different, but everybody has a vote, and the redistricting maps pass legal muster in our state.
It really comes down to the root of the problem that's happening in Madison. And I appreciate the question that you're dealing with gerrymandering, and the Republican Party had the ability to set up the boundaries so that it benefited them the most. And to say that the Democrats would have done the same thing, we don't know that because they didn't have that opportunity to do that. But even if they did have that choice, that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right at all. And that's the issue that I'm trying to get across to people, that what's wrong with what's going on in Madison is that we need to get together and we need to get along. Republicans need to reach across the aisle to the Democrats and come up with common agreements that make sense for both parties, for all people in the state of Wisconsin. I'll tell you, as the mayor of the city of Waupaca, we have 11 people on our council, 10 that vote, and 11th person that votes when we have a tie vote. You know what we do? We try to get everybody to agree on what's best for our community. We don't worry about just 51%, the hell with the other 49%. We worry about everybody in our community, and that goes directly to what you're saying.
Next question, directed first to Brian Smith. You guys aren't even fidgeting. There's something wrong over here.
Leon Lawrence, Town of Dane. My question concerns voter ID law as it is now. The federal judge has recently found some issues with that, and a temporary workaround, as I understand it, with the DMV doesn't seem to be working very well either. And I'm wondering whether you see fit to change that law so all people can easily vote.
Yeah, the root of the question, quite honestly, is that the Republicans feel that there's fraud going on in our elections, obviously, because they changed the rules. Now, common sense would kind of tell you that you need to have an ID to do a lot of things in this state or in this country, and you know, you need an ID to go into a bar if you're to make sure to prove that you're 21. So I mean, that seems to be their argument, quite honestly. But what they're really trying to tell us is that they believe that there's voter fraud, and it's been proven over and over and over again that it's minimal. The voter fraud is minimal here, and we're wasting way too much time on this issue and turning people off instead of wanting people to vote, to make sure that they vote. And that's what we should really be pushing for, is that everybody has the right and the opportunity to vote, and not to say that people are doing it wrongly or rightly or whatever the case is. Let's focus on what the real issue is here, and to make sure that everybody does vote.
Thank you, that's a good question. If you look at the polls about, and they haven't taken me for a few years, but I think it was in the high 60 to 70% of the people in our state supported voter ID. And really where this came from is probably more perception than reality. There was a serious perception out there that the elections were not fair. And our whole democracy is based on fair elections where people get one vote, people who are supposed to get to vote, people who are not supposed to don't get to vote. And so my theory on this whole thing, and Brian's right, there probably isn't that much voter fraud, but one person voting that shouldn't is, or a number of times is not right either. But when people lose faith in their elections, we got a problem with democracy. Now, I believe we have it figured out that anybody who wants a picture ID can get one. I know there was some DMV people that were giving some wrong information on it that got caught. But honestly, anybody, if you think government is perfect, you're sort of living in a dream world. Things do not always work right because you have a lot of people who do what they think they're supposed to and misunderstand it. But I believe we've got this thing taken care of, and we will see what happens, but I really don't believe anybody who wants to vote is not going to be able to vote if they take a little energy to get it done.
Next question, please.
We gotta have a student question, something like, how's the football team doing or something?
Bill C. Lodi. This question has been brought up several times. I'm going to ask it in a little bit different way. I'm not asking you how you're going to vote, but we have something happening in America called the Donald Trump phenomenon. My question is, how do you see that impacting your particular candidacy in the 14th district?
Yeah, I don't think it affects my candidacy. It may affect the outcome, depending on if people go vote or not. But what he does not affect how I run my campaign, how I do my job, or anything. He doesn't have any impact on me as a person or as a senator.
We're in a, seeing all the TV ads, and if you've had the opportunity to, and you must not have a TV or a radio or a newspaper if you haven't seen the slanted things that have been happening at the federal level. And I'm surprised that more people, have not turned off their TVs and are real concerned about it. So I got to tell you, people want to hear about the issues. People want to talk about what's going to be right for your constituency. When I go to talk to people, they want to know what I'm going to do to help with our transportation issues, or our education, or our environment. So I hope one thing that comes out of this, quite honestly, is that people find a way to stick to the issues and make sure that we don't have that much time to really explain ourselves. So we want to talk more about the issues that are going to help us in our district.
Direct first to Brian Smith.
Kelsey Ayer, Lodi. Maybe back to the last question about voter IDs and with the you said something about minimal fraud in the elections. We're told that every vote counts, so we should vote. So when the voter fraud technically count towards it, and why would that not matter?
Every vote does count, and we don't want to see fraud in anything that happens, no matter what we're talking about. And we don't want to see anything that is illegally done. And you're right, somebody that votes twice, or somebody that does something that's illegal, we don't want to see that happen. But we don't know that voter ID is going to correct that. That's not the issue. I think the important part of this whole thing is that there was more to the voter ID rules than just to put your picture out there and make sure that you get a picture. You know, the DMV had some issues, there's no doubt about that. And so we're gonna have some problems in this election because of the issues that are happening, not only at the DMV and just getting pictures, but also, don't forget within that bill for voter ID, you know what they wanted to do? They wanted to reduce the number of voting places and the amount of time that you get to vote. So instead of being able to vote from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, in some places you're going to be able to only vote from, and I'm just using this as an example, 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. Or in Milwaukee, instead of having all these different precincts, you're going to only have 1 or 2 precincts to vote. So do you think everybody's going to have the opportunity to vote when they're going to have to stand in even longer lines than they had to in April?
Well, that's not quite right. I usually don't argue with Brian up here, but I got to straighten the record on that. No, in fact, it was interesting. A number of years ago, different communities started, everybody closes at 8 o'clock, but different communities started at different times, and we felt that it was important that everybody across the state start at the same time. And I think now it's 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock, because some communities didn't even start voting till 9. The thing that really was interesting is we have early voting now. And so you live in Lodi, if you're old enough to vote, the local community decides how early, a number of days before the election, you can vote. There are some cities in the state that have been voting probably for a month and a half already. And so is it fair that if you live in rural Wisconsin where you can only early vote for X number of days, and somebody in another community gets to have the window to vote a lot longer, is that really fair across the state? And so what we did is say, we didn't say hours, we just said early voting starts here and ends on election day versus letting communities decide how often, if they're going to be open on Sundays and Saturdays and things like this, where people out in rural Wisconsin, they don't get that opportunity. And so the big thing is making sure that hours are as fair as possible, but the court said no, let local communities decide how long, in many days they want people to vote. Yeah, who's first?
And I've got my stuff in order. Okay, next question, please.
Okay.
The two candidates, you think you could keep it straight, but it's another one of those things that isn't quite perfect. Mr. Roche.
Yeah. So you believe that sparsely populated rural areas are at a disadvantage for voting as opposed to major cities which have millions. That's your view. I don't understand how you can assume that people in a big city with much larger populations can do it in the same amount of time that a sparsely populated rural district can. So explain that to me. And have you increased the amount of early voting? Or have you decreased it from what you previously had under a previous administration?
I think a lot of our information came from the county clerks and local municipalities, but...
Could you speak up a little louder?
Sure. Large communities have lots of places to vote. It's not like you have, in Milwaukee, you have 1 or 2 places. Every ward, the local folks determine, the state doesn't determine where a community votes, the local folks do. And so if the city of Milwaukee says, you know what, we're going to combine 2 or 3 wards, that's their decision. It is not the state's decision. So when I'm talking about opportunity to vote, I'm talking about number of days. But in urban areas, they have voting booths or places in schools, and they have them in all kinds of community places that people can go vote. There is not a limited number of polling spots on election day. And if there is, it's because the local elected officials decided to do that, not the state of Wisconsin. What I'm saying is number of days that you can vote. And in rural Wisconsin, you don't have this many days to vote. We still have absentee balloting, so you can do that. But if you want to vote in person, the days are limited for that.
We live, almost the whole district is in a rural area, quite honestly, and I don't know how many of our communities, but in the city of Wapaco, which is the third largest municipality in our district, we have one place to vote, and we emphasize that, and it makes it, quite honestly, in my opinion, easier for people to vote because they have one spot to vote. But obviously, in the larger communities, that doesn't work. You can't just have one place to vote. And again, he decided that I might have misstated things, but I think he needs to look at the record himself, because part of the voter ID rule was to reduce the number of precincts that larger communities that can vote in. I know that because I am a city mayor and I talk daily with my city clerk, and so those things I do know, and that was my biggest issue, quite honestly, with the voter ID rule, was not so much the picture ID, but the number of places that you were allowed to vote at, and to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote in a timely manner. I mean, that's even more. I mean, we don't want people that have to stand in line for 2 and 3 hours, like we saw in Arizona.
We have time for one more question before closing statements.
There's a student that has a question.
We've had two from over here. We'll get another one over here.
Alex from Lodi. If you were elected, what is your first plan of action?
So the big question for Luther and I is, do you get 2 A's now that you asked 2 questions? Let's start with that. But first plan of action, quite honestly, is, and again, I was elected mayor, and I've been mayor for 15 years now, and I thought that I was going to change the world, and I found out that not everything that I thought could be done needs to be done or can be done. So quite honestly, the first thing that's most important to me is education. Education is the root of what we need to do in our state and in our country. So we need to make sure that we have enough funding for our school systems. We need to make sure that teachers are proud to still be teachers in our state, and that they're not running away from us and retiring it. Isn't it amazing that, and I'm a former teacher, when I became a teacher, I had 2 opportunities for job applicants, 2, in the whole state. I would have gone anywhere, so I was a young individual. I only had 2, and I took one of those. Now, 5 years after this current administration, there are job openings all over our state. Doesn't it make you wonder really what's going on?
I'm going to refine your question a little bit and give you what my priorities are and what I'm going to work on. If I'm lucky enough to get reelected and be on joint finance, I'm going to make sure that we have money for the university system, more money for the K-12 system, dealing with figuring this transportation budget out. And that's going to be very contentious and very, very difficult to do. But I think it's something that we really need to get done. We cannot continue to borrow money to fix our roads, because you guys are going to be paying for it, and then you'll have no money to fix the roads when it's your time to fix the roads. So that's the big thing. Education, as I said, more money for the university. We do have a teacher shortage in this state. Brian's right, but we have a teachers shortage all over the country. This is not unique to Wisconsin by any means. In fact, the biggest problem that I see in our state is we have a worker shortage no matter what jobs, from early level or low starter jobs, right now, to high skilled jobs. Everybody is short of employees, and if we're going to have a state and the economy that grows, we got to make sure that we have a population that is prepared and wants to work, and we got to figure out how are we going to solve that problem. I represent the Dells. They can't find people to clean rooms. I represent Green Lake. There's a place there that they can't let you into the room until 7 o'clock at night because they don't have enough people to clean the rooms. We have a serious problem that we've got to deal with.
Thank you. And that concludes the question and answer segment of the program. And by agreement, we will now proceed to closing statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes for a closing statement, beginning with Brian Smith. Brian.
Thank you. First of all, again, I want to really thank you for this. It's very important that we are able to discuss this with you and so that you can make a learned decision. I do want to tell the students, but also the adults in here, I want you to make sure that you do your own research on the candidates. I want you to make sure that you understand who you're voting for when you go to the ballot box. You can't just listen to the individual and believe that what that person is saying is the way that they're going to act. And let me tell you a perfect example of this. You know, my opponent says that he's in favor of education, in increasing the funding to education, increasing the funding to transportation, but he voted 100% of the time with the conservative Republicans in our state that chose to reduce this, to put us in the situation that we are. So don't just listen to the tongue. Make sure you do your own research and go through that. The reason I'm running is because I'm a proven leader. I'm the mayor of the city of Waupaca. I've been elected to 8 terms in the city of Waupaca. I am a small business owner. I'm the managing partner in my accounting firm, and I'm also the managing partner in a restaurant and a bar that my brothers and I own, a bar restaurant in downtown Waupaca. So I've proven that I am a good leader and that that I can do the right things for people. And again, I want to make sure that you understand that I'm not going to do something that I'm going to be sorry for later by passing 999 motions that are going to strip us of our open records laws in the state. I'll stop right now.
Thank you. You can read.
You can't see it. She's got a big sign that says stop. We do that. Again, I'd like to thank you folks for having this forum. This is really, really important. I take the responsibility of being your state senator very, very, very seriously. As I said, and usually finish up my forum time, I explain how I take this job. And I look at this job as a delegate and a trustee. A delegate means that you're elected by people to carry out their wishes. And majority rules, what I say that I'm going to do when I'm running is what I do, if at all possible. Sometimes I don't get it done. But I'm not a Senate of one, so you've got to compromise. I also am a trustee, and a trustee is a person who people put their trust in, like the word says, to study the issues and work to come up with the right answer on those issues that are brought before you, to figure out what's the best thing for the 14th Central District and the state of Wisconsin. And we deal with a lot of complicated issues. And one of the things that I am noted for in Madison is that I have common sense, and I'm willing to sit down and talk to the other side and negotiate. If you look at the bills that passed into law this last year, in the mid-90s were bipartisan bills. In other words, Republicans and Democrats voted or co-sponsored those bills. So it really isn't as contentious as people would have you believe. But there's a few things that are contentious because Republicans believe one thing, Democrats believe another, and people have a different way of doing things. So I'm very proud, and I would ask for your support on the 8th, because my goal is to be not a partisan act, but to be a statesman. Thank you very much.
And thank you to both Brian Smith and Luther Olson. Gentlemen, thank you for your appearance here today and for your willingness to serve the public and enter the public arena. Let's give them a hand.